All right, Sam. Hey, how you going?
I'm well, not very well, but well.
I'm famous for not doing any long introductions and just getting straight on into it, because why the hell not? And so we've known each other not that long, but I felt from the moment that I met you there was just so much in your brain I wanted to crack open and eat directly, which sounds really creepy, or consume at least, just to try upload some of that knowledge into me. So mate, I'm really pleased for you making the time. So thank you.
No, look, it's my pleasure.
Good, thank you. You say that now. Give it half an hour and see how you feel then. I'm really interested in we've been having some conversations around the AI enablement of developing insight, value drivers, industry examples, and prioritizing initiatives. This is your world. And I know that you're leaning into this at the moment with your current enterprise. So, my standard start off question is as it relates to this, what's on your mind at the moment for, the world of innovation, delivery, business? I feel like I'm guiding you and I shouldn't, but around that stuff, what are you really wrangling with in your world?
Yeah, well, look, I think that that sort of innovation dilemma still exists in regard to, for a lot of organizations, what they do to succeed as an organization. Sometimes when they sit down, they start with a blank piece of paper, and that's a key challenge for them. So it's actually the identification of the problems that are worth solving is a problem in their own right, to actually get the right people around the table, get the right headspace. Much as you were saying, we haven't known each other for a long time, but it's making connections and bringing in external perspectives sometimes is critical in being able to articulate the problems with enough fidelity that then you gain some confidence that actually these are the things that we should chase. And I think that, so you've got that pre-existing dilemma, which I think still remains. And now we have this AI dilemma, which is there's so much hype, and everybody is so excited about AI, and specifically it's Gen AI. So it's these large language models, and we'll talk about what makes them different, but what makes them a bit of a perplexing challenge for organizations as well. But now they're saying, right, what are we going to apply Gen AI to? Which is starting with a solution in mind and then hunting for a problem. So you don't know how to identify the problems, and now you've got a solution that you want to implement, and you still don't know the problems you want to solve. And so I think it's compounding that dilemma for organizations. Boards will be asking CEOs, how are we using AI within our business? And then before they've got the answer, they'll be saying, how do we know that it's ethical and responsible and we've got good governance over it? And then CEOs will be asking their executive, where are we applying AI within the business? And it's a digital construct, but they'll be asking every executive, because that's what Gen AI has done. It's this general purpose AI that can be applied across a business. So it might be it goes to the head of HR, it goes to the head of the CIO. So all of your C-suite are going to get hit with that question. And so I think it's disabling, because everybody is trying to say, okay, what's the use case? What's this killer use case within our business? When that's probably, it's just a great multi-tool that's just come onto the market, and we still need to start with fundamentals. We need to say, what is our strategy? Where are we heading? How are we performing? Where are we behind? What are the challenges that we face? And then could AI be an enabler for us in actually, improving performance or getting through some of those challenges? And so I think that's the space that I'm in. It's sort of core strategy, what is value, prioritization, but then bringing in that technical understanding and that understanding of the application of AI to say, right, now that we've got fundamentals right, and we know where we should be facing and what we should be hunting down, how do we then use the lens of AI to see whether we can accelerate or amplify solutions?
It's interesting because it's funny you talk about the innovation dilemma and now the AI dilemma. And as I've understood it right, I think you're actually using AI as a tool to solve the innovation dilemma. That's right? I've got that right.
Yeah. So I think if the challenge is starting, like just starting, because we start with a blank page, one of the things that has really built sort of public acceptance of AI and is driving, let's say, if we subscribe to the hype curve, yeah, it's driving the hype and it's driving all the investment behind it, is that we've hit a tipping point in the scale of these transformer models that allows it to, through natural language, provide quite complex, nuanced responses, but is also based on almost like the corpus of human digitized knowledge. So you can use that to then get to that front and say, okay, analyze my strategy. So use the AI to say, right, do an analysis of my strategy. Use the AI to say, do an analysis of my performance. Okay, now tell me what the gap is between the two. And so the approach that I'm taking is using AI at that at the front end of the process to say, rather than getting a group of people together, getting them to come and present all of their challenges and ideate and what are their initiatives and where do they think AI should apply, to use the AI to do that rapid analysis of their business, their performance, the landscape that they're operating in. What is their industry doing? What are their peers doing? What are the adjacent industries doing? Such that you get to trying to get through the noise and get to a signal quickly. Now, it's not that it's right, it's just that it's not a blank page. And so it's much easier for people to critique something and say that's not right for these reasons, or that won't work for these reasons, than it is to build from the bottom up. And so for organizations who are stuck in the innovation dilemma, and they're on both fronts now, how can I use AI to enhance my business performance? How can I use AI to accelerate what we're trying to do with our strategy? Then we use the AI to do that initial analysis, that initial benchmarking, that initial ideation of the application of AI, such that then we can then engage the executive on critiquing that. And all you need is one. You just need one initiative that aligns with strategy, that will deliver the right type of value to your business, which may be growth, might be an improvement in consumer sentiment. It may be that you have sustainability targets that you're struggling to achieve, or it might be in the headwinds of sort of current macroeconomic environment, that you need to find some efficiencies in your business to improve its sort of sustainability and its buoyancy in this market. Then use the AI to help identify some of those opportunities where AI can be applied, and the different flavors of the same technologies, but you're using it as an assistant to get to the start point, and then you're going to use it as an assistant to actually then drive the outcome in your business.
It's such three things there, and such a lovely turn of phrase. Using natural language to extract complex business knowledge against the corpus of all human knowledge. I'm going to steal that too. And I know you know that I'm a fan of just starting, because that is the problem for many people. Although I would add just starting and then not bolting on lots of complexity, which means then you delay the start. So that. But then this thing I also really deeply subscribe to is, it's not that it's right, it's just that it's not a blank page. It's just such it's so true, right? It's like, where do we start?
And I think it's a critical construct for how organizations innovate. It's like this concept of perfect is the enemy of good. So good and done. So understand where you're heading, define some clear measures of success, sort of your leading and lagging indicators, and then start. And that's where the Agile process kicks in. And it's like, apply Agile in any area of your business. It's simply just rapid iterations and evaluations and minor course corrections, so that you can try and capture value early and often, on a path to a really great destination. So one of the analogies I talked about when trying to talk to people about sort of pulling all these concepts together was, you could stand on the shoreline of Australia, and you could chart a course to England, and you could do it with absolute fidelity, and then you could get on your boat and you could follow that course. But if you didn't check your course and your bearings along the way. And if you didn't constantly course correct and calibrate, then you wouldn't make it to where you're planning to get to. You just wouldn't get there. The headwinds, the tides, the waves, etc., they would all move you off course. And so that master planning that sometimes we do is not always the best way to actually plan and execute a program of work to get to the optimal destination. And it's not necessarily that if you use Agile and those constant course corrections, you're necessarily going to get there any quicker. It's just that you're more likely to get to your destination. And so I think Agile just gives you those small feedbacks that, yes, I'm heading the right way. Yes, I'm heading the right way. Okay, we make a small course correction, or we change our priorities now. We drop the mainsail because the wind's too strong and that stops us capsizing. And so it's these constant course corrections that make it more likely that you're going to hit that strategic goal than if you simply try and master plan it from the start. And this worked incredibly well in software development because of some of the advantages you have in the digital domain. You can just go back and recode something, and then boom, everything inherits that new capability. And so it's easier. It's much harder to do that, let's say, when you're designing an aircraft, to just go back and make some sort of fundamental change at the start, because the real world is different. But for organizations, there are more and more aspects of their business that are digitally enabled, and therefore there are more and more aspects of their business where they can take that agile delivery approach.
It's just on that theme of you're on the coast of Australia and you're planning your trip to England. Thank you for picking the homeland, by the way. And I accept about course corrections and calibrations and iterations, evaluations. I think you said reiterations all make sense. How far should we be planning out, though? Because one of the tension points I find often is, someone's got an idea. Actually, the work that you do has been done, and a priority has been picked, and it's whether we come in whether we can engineer that or not, right? And stay connected. But at the same time, engineers in my camp would say, well, don't plan the trip all the way to England because you don't know. You can't see that far ahead. For example, let's say it's uncharted waters. Plan it to the next logical destination. But sometimes that feels like there isn't. I use the word master plan. It feels like there isn't a master plan. It feels like it could be a little bit, I don't know, too loose maybe. And so I'm at war with, don't over architect the whole journey. Don't even pick England. Maybe there's somewhere better along the way. But just start this leg and see what happens. Like, where do you sit in that camp?
It's a really sort of important question, because it goes towards what is success, and importantly, if you're defining success, you're defining an outcome, and you're investing in that outcome. It's almost like, what is your investment thesis that sits behind that? And so often we'll have a project. The project will have a budget, and then we just execute on that, and we get to the end and we say, well, we on time, are we on budget? Yeah. But when do we go back and say, should we have continued, and did we do the right thing? Then often that's not the question that's asked. The project is measured on, was it on time, was it on budget? And so I think that going back to your questions, like, how far out should you plan, and what are the alternative destinations that might be there? So if we simply said we think that we want to go to England, we think that's the highest value outcome for us, but when we get to, if we're going via a set of islands, let's say, if we decide that the risk from those islands to England outweighs the benefit of the destination, then maybe then the ROI doesn't stack up. And so I think this is the critical piece, is that we want to define an outcome in the business that has enough value. And this is when you can talk about small innovations, but where we're sort of talking, and we're talking about the application of AI, and we're really talking about the transformations that organizations need to go through. So these digital-led transformations, and now they'll be AI-led transformations. They're looking at a large stack of value in the business. They want to transform something about their business that is really meaningful. And then we say that that is worthwhile, and so we're going to invest in a team to try and pursue that outcome. But we're not going to master plan it, and we're going to bring it back and say, okay, what is, we talk about minimum viable product should be, what is the minimum dent we're going to have in our organization? We're going to panel beat this organization. What's the minimum dent that we want to achieve that is going to be valuable? And that's what our MVP is. And so once we've done that, that is success in its own right. That achieves the ROI and has merit. The next step along the roadmap has its own ROI. And so, because there's always uncertainty, there's always potential value, and then there's uncertainty around that value. And so we talk about like these value bars, you're low and you're high, and all you're trying to do is the next bit, you've done your MVP, the next bit of work might be some discovery work to challenge an assumption or something that's driving that uncertainty, such that the error bar gets smaller, you've got more confidence, and then you invest and you go for the next step in that transformation. And so I think that on that journey to England, maybe you've charted this course that keeps stopping in destinations and refueling, etc. And at every point, you're reevaluating whether the next leg of the journey makes sense. Yeah, so you're trying to get from where you are to somewhere better, and each step along that course has its own return on investment. And so I think it's in that, guys, that you have that step change light on the horizon that you're aiming for. It's this profound shift in your organization, it's transformation, and you're taking all of these innovative steps to get there, and it's based on an acceptable ROI. And at the point where the next step isn't the next best investment for you as a business, at that point that you maybe then say, right, that's the extent of that transformation, that innovation within our business. And it may be because there is a cultural or a technical or a legislative element that erodes that value that might change in time, and then you can reevaluate the business case for that next step. But I think that's the philosophy that I think if you take that, it means that you get to move early, you get to move often, and you get to scale the value, but you're always applying it back to, well, why are we putting the money in to begin with? What type of return did we need to get? And so you always bring it back to sort of that value-based thesis.
Mm-hmm. You've said something to me the other day when we were chatting, and I'm going to replay it in a way that you said many things actually, but this is one of the things, and I've been playing around with him. It's because we were talking about going from POC, prototype, pilot, MVP, scaled product, and you were giving me some feedback on the way I'm visualizing things, and it made me think about if I go product is the end, I need to think about what my ROI is on the end product. Like, what do I want? It's going to change the world if that comes true. I've got that in my mind. What does that look like? And then I've started to go, okay, so what does my POC look like that I'm going to deliver by Christmas? And how do I increase the fidelity of my understanding after the POC stage, remove the risk, and then finesse the ROI that I expect? And then is it a go or a no-go January onwards? I really like and I'm not sure I've interpreted it right, but that's what I'm imagining. I'm imagining, whatever, a $10 million business for $1 million investment, whatever. I mean, that's not a good return, but that's what's on my mind. Let's say it's that. And then how is it? Okay, good. Can I have $1 million, please? And it really resonated with me, and I think I've got that right. And it feels a little bit different from what we're saying here, but I feel like I'm learning from what you've said that is the right, what ROI do you expect in the end, and then assess along the way each of those stages that I'm defining, and make sure I course correct and calibrate around what I'm finding, and come up with a higher fidelity hypothesis, if that's the right term for that. It's fascinating, because why, even in this conversation, I've learned that why doesn't everyone do that? Like, what's the problem? Like, actually, let me come back to rephrase the question. I'll come back to why. Like, what's an uncommonly held truth that you have that around this that not everybody holds? What truths do you hold on that might make you unpopular?
Look, it's I think the unpopular aspect is that it takes time, effort, and therefore money as well to identify the problems you need to solve as a business. And so I think that there is this assertion that if you simply just turn to your people in your business and say, all right, what should we do? That you'll get an answer, and then you can just raise some money, get a budget, and go and execute. And that if these people were worth their weight and their wage, then they would have the answers, and if they've been with the organization for a period of time, then they should know who we are and what we need to do. And if they haven't been with the organization for that long, then they probably don't know us well enough, and therefore they don't know what we need to do. And I think it's some of those misconceptions around innovation and transforming your organization which stand in the way. I had a conversation with someone recently and talked about if you want to transform your organization, if you want to genuinely drive innovation in the way that you work and the things that you do and the way that your clients experience you, then you're probably talking about a 10% hit on your productivity across the board for a period of time before you start seeing that value. And you can't just hire in a transformation lead to do this, because at the heart of a transformation is cultural change, it is behavioral change, it is a change to your people, process, and the technology. So that digitization is really only one part of the change that's going to take place, and you need to be able to get input from and galvanize your people within your organization, and they need to be on that journey of change. And I think that it is that aspect that is in part unpalatable. It's almost like I think this is just like, for me, this is like, if I say this to people, they sort of accept it and say, yeah, that makes sense, that's true, but they just still don't do it or haven't done it. And so I think that for me, it's those things are held true. You need to be able to deploy your people. You need to give them space to experiment and do some discovery to determine that the problems that we think are worth solving are in fact worth solving, before you actually go and actually try and solve them. And that goes, if we step then back to what you were saying around your own journey and that path from 1 million to 10 million, and the POC, I think the POC has to have measures and metrics around it that align to the scaled value, so that when you get to the end of the POC, you can say, and it may be that, look, there were some key technical questions that gave us uncertainty, and in our POC we've proven that those technical things can be done and done at scale. And so what that's doing now is it's giving you greater certainty in the value that you can capture now as you scale that development. And so I think that the metrics of success start at the POC level. They may gain fidelity as you get greater clarity around what it is that you're building, but they all need to be aligned to the delivery of the strategy that you have and the delivery of value aligned with that strategy. They just sort of increase in their fidelity over time. And so I think that it is where do you want to go? How are we defining success? And then what are the key challenges or opportunities that we think we need to go after in order to actually capture that value and deliver strategy? And then giving your people the time and the space, and the, we talk about psychological safety, like they're going to fail. Not all their ideas are going to be right, and we need to not see that as wasted effort. We need to celebrate the fact that we didn't raise a budget and kick off a large project only to find a year later that was the wrong thing to do. And so those first things, they're hard things to do because they're cultural, they're behavioral, and they're parasitic on your current performance. And so I think that's why people don't do them, because they're difficult. Even though they sort of make sense, they're just unpalatable.
I'm just writing something. I need to write it before it escapes my mind. Honestly, I just love it so much. It would be very unpopular to say innovation is a parasite on current performance, Sam. It's very good. Accepting that it's unpalatable, accepting that it takes time, money, and effort, accepting people need space and time. Sounds like an Einsteinian formula. And if you want to transform, this is the parasite bit, 10% on productivity. Man, there's good stuff in
the whole
there.
thing is that the thing that you need to match it to, and this is, so I've for many years I've sat on boards and then founded organizations and developed boards and written lots of policies, of course, which I hate following from an innovator's point of view. But in Australia, we talk a lot about risk management, which means we are focused only on risk, where it should actually be risk and opportunity assessment. What is the opportunity that we are chasing, and what is the risk that we need to manage in the pursuit of that opportunity? So when we're talking about this parasitic effort, it's like, what is the scale of the opportunity that we think that we could capture as an organization? And then this parasitic piece is, we need to invest our time, people, and money, which means we can't deploy them in traditional business. We need to deploy them in the pursuit of this opportunity. A base jumper does not only take on risk. People say that's really risky, but a base jumper is in pursuit of the high, of extending their art as a base jumper, and in challenging themselves physically and emotionally and mentally in jumping off cliff. That is the opportunity they're pursuing, and then they manage all of the risks around it. Who packs their chute? What is their reserve chute? They don't jump off without a parachute, so they're not just so they don't just take on pure risk. And so, although I say it's parasitic, that is just the acceptance that if you want to transform your organization and you want to capture this large transformed value, you need to accept that you need to invest in that, and you need to manage the risks associated with trying to get to that destination. And it is foolish to think that you can just ask a bunch of people who are smart in your organization and have been there for a long time, what do we need to do? And then think you can just write a program of work and go and do it. Because you actually haven't effectively, by doing the discovery, by engaging your people, by giving them the space to explore and fail, that just means that the idea was wrong, but you've learnt that it's wrong. And so fail fast is actually just about learning fast, and learning fast is really important. We learn through failure, we learn through success. So if organizations simply said, we want to be transformed, it will breathe a new life into our organization, it will make us contemporary, it'll generate all this value, then we say we're going to need to change hearts, minds, processes, technologies within the organization, and therefore we need to know where we're going, how we're going to measure success. We need to work out where we start, back to the innovator's dilemma. Where do we start? And that our start point may lead to a learning, but not something we want to move forward with. And so it's that failure. And so you need to create that safe space within the organization.
Man, there is so much to this, and I think it applies not only to people I do business with, but even my own business. In terms of the balancing the tension, this is one of the things I've been playing around with, but balancing that tension between fast delivery and long-term value. Like, where do you sit in terms of fast delivery, long-term value, balancing the tension? Like, what do you believe in around that?
In part, I think it comes down to what is the business model, and what is the definition of success. So, and there's a couple of layers to this. So, if you think about fast fashion, so low cost, not designed to be an enduring garment that you might wear. You may only want to wear a few times, and so a lesser quality garment that will, its style and its build and everything else is not designed to be enduring. That is your business model. So you simply just, so it's almost like point solutions, because we know that the market just constantly wants point solutions. And so there isn't the business is not around scaled, it's around being able to turn around quickly and meet immediate demands. And so I think that there's a question now, there's a whole raft of issues around fast fashion and sustainability and that sit around that. But I think that as an organization, you need to understand what is your reason for being, what's the why of the organization, what is your purpose, what elements of that are scaled and enduring, they're those big sort of lofty elements, and therefore how do you chart a path to achieving those, knowing that you can't climb a mountain in a day, so you need to actually have these increments to it. And so you may decide that you want to create almost like a platform capability that is going to drive enduring value over time. And so but you can't build the entire platform in day one. And so you need to be able to build it in consumable components that deliver value to your customers. And then you continue to invest and grow and invest and grow. And so I think it comes back to the short answer to it is you need to understand your purpose. You need to then define a strategy and your measures of success, and it will dictate for you as an organization what is that balance between that long-term planning and that smaller agile delivery.
There's a thought in that, and it is this, and I really like it. Don't do fast delivery if it's not delivering consumable value that's part of a long-term value proposition.
Yeah.
And
I
like
it comes back to so I always draw back to strategy, and strategy said you've got your why of your organization, what is the purpose of your organization, you've got a strategy which is like the articulation of how you're in that constant pursuit of that, and then you're going to create metrics on value which will help you assess how you're performing and help you prioritize the things that you should do, because you need to balance them out against one another. And I think if you've done that work, or you have that work in your organization, then you have the ability to then evaluate any project or initiative that you do in respect of that, whether it is large or it is small, and you can decide is it something that is going to be delivered in lots of really small increments, it's going to be super agile, lots of value drops and then grow over time, or is it something that because of what you're trying to achieve needs to be delivered in sort of larger chunks? But again, there's very few things. Even when we build a road, we don't rarely do we open the entire road all at once. A tunnel, yes, it's hard to, on linear assets, it's hard to open up a section of a linear assets. But although roads are linear assets, they have off ramps and on ramps, etc. And so you can actually start opening sections, and they maintain sections over time. And so, even in large infrastructure projects, we're trying to think about incremental value drops, simply because it allows us to prove value earlier, and it allows to adjust and calibrate for the remainder of that value delivery.
I was listening to a podcast recently, and I think it might have been Chris Williams, Modern Wisdom, and they were talking about at what point does a pause become uncomfortable. And as I sit here processing your thoughts and experiences and jotting them down, I'm observing that I'm proud to extend out a pause, which is something I'd not gotten until I'd really appreciated what it takes to interview someone like this and create a podcast. And I think it's also, I don't mean this as any false statement. It's really a thing when you're saying so much, Sam, that I'm like, that resonates, that connects. I believe that, I see that, I understand that. I think it loops back to my other question I have, and the thing I said to you last minute this morning, which is I was with some delivery leaders and project managers and technical delivery leads, you know, all the people that would come and do the work that you would imagine. And sorry, when you imagine the work that you would arrive at and define and say, this is where we get to value the executors of. And the question I sent you is, one of them said to me, it's amazing how many people can unagile themselves by implementing agile. And it relates to the other thing that's on my mind is if everything you're saying feels viscerally true, why isn't it done this way? Why do we, you know, I'm not even going to lead. I'll just leave it there. Why do we unagile ourselves? And why isn't everybody building incrementally like this?
I think there's always misconceptions when we present new ways of working and we have new theory. So like part of my role with IBM Garage is that Garage created its own language around the things that it was doing, and in part there are reasons for doing that. Is one, by making something different, you get to maybe get attention. You get to shift people because they have to shift into that mindset. They need to shift into that language, and so I think that there are some deliberate things that are done in those language. And you think about Agile, we talk about ceremony, we talk about ritual. You know, some of these words are an affront to traditional management types because we have meetings and we have agendas, and you know, and so, but part of the language is, by its nature, is to exclude it from the current vernacular and the current process and procedure and method, such that it is cast as different. So it's let's say it's a step change, etc. The challenge is that cults do this as well, and it's done to be exclusionary. If you don't know the language and the lingo, then you can't be in the cult. And so rarely do you hear positive things said about cults. And so I think that it's sort of a double-edged sword in regard to we create these methods and these frameworks that purport this new way of working, and we give them a specific language, and we appropriate terms from other parts of culture to very clearly make these different. And that can be helpful because it can have its own gravity to draw a portion of the population in who are driven to that, and it can help you use it as a way to differentiate between, you know, project management versus agile. You know, project management has a Gantt chart and these things, and we have a Scrum Master, and we've got our we've got coaches, and we've got our ceremonies with these rituals, and we've got chapters, and we've got all these things. And so people almost have to like be all in to try and get their head around it. The challenge is that then that's how you get that kernel of change, but then how do you actually then make it transformative for an entire organization? And so I think it's a dilemma in this change to this new way of working. But if you think about Prince 2 delivery and Agile delivery, they are just methods of delivery. Like you could draw them in the same box, and sometimes they're just methods of delivery. They both have ways of communicating intent and charting a path. They both have specific feedback loops and metrics. They work on sort of different timeframes. They chunk the work up differently. They engage the workforce differently because they have some different philosophies on how they get to value. But they both want to get to value. And so I think that in part we are victims of this, victims of new. So when we try and create something new and we try and create change, often we'll use a language which which supports our mission at the start point, but then actually can work to a disadvantage on the long run. And so I think that's sort of, I like the idea of an agile manifesto that appeals to my psyche, and sort of it's a bit of an affront, for in regard to, if we're talking about manifestos and how that can actually change the way that you work. But I think that there's a large portion who are more dismissive of that, and it actually is, it's less palatable, and so I think that we're stuck, that the absorption of agile into traditional ways of working is in part because we have organizations that you could argue function well, they deliver value, they are stable, they are reliable, their work is repeatable, and they don't use agile. And so therefore our business model is sound and we don't have agile. And I don't like the idea of rituals, so I'm not going to do it. And so that's what I think we're in part up against.
It's like an autoimmune response. It's interesting what you're saying there to me. The question I was asking is, why do organizations, in the pursuit of agile, unagile themselves?
I think that in part it goes back to that if you want to utilize agile within your organization, then you need to change culture and behavior. So if you think about if culture is the manifestation of the repeated behaviors that we have, or if we change culture, we're going to change behaviors in a repeated way, that you need to make a shift to the culture of your organization for agile to really thrive and survive. And unless you very overtly and in a very controlled way deal with the interplay between non-agile and agile working, then I think what will happen over time is that you bring agile in, and slowly but surely the non-agile creeps over it. So it's fine that you have your ceremonies, but we're going to need meeting minutes, and it's fine that you have your that you're going to have your stand-ups in the morning, but you do need to attend the weekly planning meeting for the department. And so you end up with these, you don't get the full appreciation of the fact that the agile ways of working deal with the fundamentals of documentation, communication, allocation of resources, evaluation of performance. Like, it's all built into the agile ways of working, but unless they are lined up and the business sees them, that they're actually delivering all the things that we need, you can then end up with the overlay of the other ways of working on top. And so all you do is you bloat it. And so any of the advantages that you were going to get through agile, you're going to lose very quickly, because you're going to break your teams out of flow state. You're going to be adding busy work to what they're doing and duplication of effort. And that's going to slow them down, which means you don't necessarily, I think, going back to that boat analogy, it doesn't necessarily change the duration of your trip. It's not saying that agile makes people more efficient necessarily. What it does do is it just adds in these corrections more frequently and evaluates success more frequently, which means you're more likely to get to a destination that you want to get to. And so if it's not a full shift within your organization and a full embracement of it, and then an alignment between different ways of working and delivering and making sure, and from an IBM and a garage point of view, we had an interface team which dealt with governance, and we had a synchronization forum where we synchronized traditional Prince 2 project delivery with agile delivery. So we're very clear on dependencies and release dates, so that the organization was able to absorb at the speed of agile delivery. There's no point having 6 monthly releases and an agile team that's outputting on fortnightly sprints, because you're not going to see that value, and they're not going to get the feedback that they need, because all they're doing is a backlog of releases that only get deployed into the business every 6 months. And so it's not necessarily an all in or don't, but if you can't apply it across the breadth of your organization, you just need to acknowledge and be transparent around the way that you're going to manage the interfaces between them. And without doing that, then I think it's a little bit like that acknowledgement of, transformation is parasitic. If you know that you're not going to do those things, then you've got to know that it is simply over time it's going to not deliver the value that you expect it should.
I just found myself doodling some visuals to the words that you're saying, and I have a skinny agile and a bloated agile here. I really like agile over bloated agile. And then I have do it but don't bloat it, do it but overtly and relentlessly deal with where it overlays the traditional. There's really something in that as well. I think you're giving me so much to work with over the coming weeks, Sam. It's crazy. Something you said before caused this question, and I wrote this. I wonder if it's is the creation of cult language now intentionally exclusionary, or is it intentionally to do what it was originally designed for? And I don't mean it as a just a wishy-washy question. I mean it deeply philosophically, that people academically and egoterically love belonging to something that distinguishes them. And I wonder if anything ever has language which distinguishes people, if it's ever going to really reach its full potential, because by nature it's always going to be exclusionary, and people will always put it in a, in some, well, give it cult-like status. Therefore, I'm going to resist.
Look, I think it is. It's a really, I think language and the use of language is, if it had its day around, let's say, the time of Shakespeare and these very erudite individuals in the way they communicated, I think in the age of AI, in natural language interfaces, this is like the renaissance of language. Why? Because I say this to my kids constantly: words have meaning. And so you want to choose words. You might have 10 different words that deal with the grayscale between a black and a white position. And so words have meaning. And so I think that when we talk about the use of words to create like these subcultures, they're used in part to differentiate. But if someone doesn't have that meaning in their lexicon, then they're immediately excluded. And so whether the intent is to create belonging, the perverse outcome of it is it makes others not belong. And so when you're talking about using these, and we talk about new ways of working and applying them to existing businesses, you're almost like creating a subculture within the culture, and it excludes the breadth of the business. And so how are you going to drive a transformation, and how are you going to change the hearts and minds across the organization if you're using a language system which they're unfamiliar, uncomfortable, they can't take on board? And I think that it's really important now that we've got these large language models on the scene, because the way that we have built them is through these human semantic meaning. So the semantic being language. So we've created these models which understand the nuance of human language, and therefore if you want to engage with them effectively, you need to understand the nuance of human language as well. And so I think this idea of language and how it includes and excludes, and in this context of AI, how it actually enables this interaction between these this assistive technology that we're building. I think this idea of language is actually, I think that it's going to have a renaissance. I love language, so it's hard.
It's I'm going to hark back to a question that one of the things I observe about you, and what you've asked me to, but his ability to tell story and not tell stories, but I'm going to say build a narrative, weave common themes through many, needle small holes, and it makes me think about, those that traditionally get jobs as head of innovation or head of digital. And I won't make it about you because it's weird, but when you look at the people that you see that really master this function, What is it that you observe about those people that makes them the people that every CEO should have in their pocket, or every board should have in their pocket? What is it about their skills, demeanor, experience? Like when you look at the people you aspire to be, what is it about them?
Well, I think there's some fundamentals. I think that humility and courage are probably two, because when you are looking to drive innovation and transformation, the most important thing is to meet people where they are. And so there, like ego in respect of bad ego, there is no place for ego in leading innovation, because what you need to do is you want to engage the people within the business, and their experience and their expertise, their knowledge and their questions, and you want to help them on a journey from where they are to where we want to get to. And it doesn't matter how smart you are and how learned you are and how cross-skilled and multidisciplinary you are. You can't ask them to come to where you are. You need to bridge that gap first. And that was sort of an early lesson that I learned, is like, if I'm at A and they're at B and we want to get to C, then the first journey is from A to B, because that's how we get to C, because we need to go there as a team. So I think that humility is one part. The other part is courage. Is that we have an educational system in Australia that talks about failure as a bad thing. You failed your test, you failed your exam, you failed this, you failed that. If the person who goes and tries to get over a high jump bar and knocks it off each time and therefore fails, each time they do it, they are learning. There's this neural network and this spatial awareness of their body that is getting more acute and more acute, and then suddenly they get over that bar the next time they're there. And so, but we have this stigma with failure, and so something that I think an innovation lead needs to have is that they need to have the courage to actually talk about that. They need to have the courage to fail in the eyes of the organization themselves and demonstrate that that's actually okay. And so I think they're the two sort of start points. I think with the failure comes resilience. So you need to sort of be buoyant all the time. You need to, and because it's hard. Like, transformation is change. Change is hard. People don't like to change. Organizations don't like to change. We all want to be something else. We all have an appetite which is less than our aspirations, and then we all feel uncomfortable through that change. And so there needs to be a breadth of resilience in there. And then I think that the piece that holds good stead from a content or a thematic point of view is having sort of like the big picture strategy type piece, and then the ability to get into the detail and talk to the people who are actually doing the work, and having a comfort across that spectrum. But I wouldn't lead with that one. I think there are lots of people who are great leaders and can drive change that don't need to have that full breadth of experience. I just think it's just like a cherry on top if you've got the other aspects.
Mm-hmm. Again, humility, courage, meeting people where they're at, resilience, always, big picture to detail. And the thing you didn't say is the storytelling and analogies, but that's me attributing that characteristic. It's always something that I'm jealous of. I'm pleased with people that they have that ability to connect stories to circumstances. And I think it's something that I'm working on. You asked me at the beginning of this, and I've taken a lot of your time. Why I'm doing this? What is it? And it's this. It's exactly this moment where there is this assimilation of knowledge from so many bright people, and turning into something that I don't mean this as a condemnation of myself. I'm not you, and I've never done your job. So therefore, let's call that mere mortal. I would like to interpret what people like you do and engineers that I respect do, and translate it for mere mortals in a way that they can understand. That's what this is about. and for the people, for the friends that I care about that listen to this, to know where they can access the type of people that can help them win in business, stay in business, and if they're going to fail, fail gracefully, but see the learning vector that goes through every success and failure, because that is a thing that's incremental every time, and I'm playing around with that, and so that sort of brings us to the logical conclusion, some of what I'm thinking and why I'm doing this. We've covered a lot, and I'll replay many of the things in the coming weeks as content and context for the people that that are in our networks. Is there anything you would like to ask me? And if you do, please don't make it too difficult.
Well, firstly, I think one thing that we didn't say in that around the leadership in innovation is, I think that because you said the word mere mortals, and I think that for me, part of the role of leading through change is that servant leadership. It is about helping to and this is part of, I think, the innovation model, is you need to set the strategy, and you need to say where the value is, you need to say where we need to focus. And as soon as those people in the organization invest their time and their effort into whatever that change is, then the entire hierarchy of the organization goes into a service mindset. How do we help? How do we clear the barriers? How do we reduce the friction? Where do you need support? Why? Because those teams are in service of the organization. Therefore, the leadership in the organization needs to be in service of them. And so I think for me, that's one of the fundamental enablers to we said, how come Agile gets bloated, etc. I think in part, if an organization, if the leadership in an organization are truly on board a transformation, they do all of the strategic, the alignment, the value, they do all the things that are necessary to provide the guidance and say, this is where we need to hunt. Teams will say, here is our hypothesis, etc. And we say, we want you to go after that. And as soon as we give them the imprimatur and say, go, then the pyramid flips and everyone's in service of them, because I think that's how you get that safety. That's how you get that confidence. That's how you drop that fear of failure and you get them going. Why? Because they know that everybody is actually rooting for them. And every time they hit a bump in the road, rather than saying you're behind budget, you're over budget and you're behind schedule, we're the ones who simply say, you know what, it's the way that we've done the process in HR, let us go and fix it. Okay, it's the way that we've written those contracts, let us go and fix it. And so I think that's a critical piece, and that's probably just was one of those things that was in my head that I hadn't said, which I think it's one of those critical pieces. I guess for you, it's you have mentioned that this is not your first time at the rodeo in pursuing new integration of value for clients, and I think that you have. We talked about some of the skills that it takes to sort of be entrepreneurial, and I think that commercial mindset being a sort of a critical piece. So I guess it's in that infancy, in that building of an organization, is your how you manage sort of the commercial reality aspects, because there's a significant sort of risk profile that comes with that, and what gives you the confidence to start and then lean in that early growth cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that wasn't too hard.
No. I believe in multiple adjacent practices. I think they feed each other. So if it's strategy, it's engineering also, it's identity also, it's managed services. I think there's that. And my belief in the beginning is that it would give me the chance to cross-sell in a complicated and uncertain market, whatever the customer is buying. And so, the early stages I've de-risked rather than being a specialist in a highly competitive market. I become a specialist, becoming a generalist. And rather than trying, so that was one thing. And then the second aspect of it is to manage my risk exposure, my cost. I pay very well contractors versus permanent employees, which enables me to flex my workforce up and down. And my belief was that as I did that, natural pockets of excellence would evolve, which they have. And I've started to refine the business down from very broad to more narrow pockets of excellence. And it wasn't like those things didn't exist when people joined. They did. They just weren't thinking of it through the lens of, well, what does that mean for Thunder Labs? And so multi-practice, manage the risk of cost, observe pockets of excellence. That's just things that I've done.
I would say I just heard strategy, clear value framework, agile initiatives, and then scale on success.
Yeah.
Very, very much sort of aligns with the sort of that conversation that we've been having, which is,
it's by instinct, not science. It's by observation as opposed to seeing, and it seems to be working. The second thing, you talked about, and this resonates, courage and resilience. Hopefully not false humility. I feel some of those attributes. But the biggest courage is I keep getting told that's not the way it's done. People keep telling me it's wrong, and that it's a foolish strategy. And I'm not talking about just the way this is playing out, because today, it's not ego here, I hope, but I could say whatever I wanted to justify past decisions, but I honestly feel that's it. But it was by accident, experimentation. It wasn't like at the beginning I'd say this is where it would be. But what I ran in parallel with that was going, right, I'm going to meet all the bright people I can, and I'm going to learn from them. So I did that in parallel with building whatever this was. So that was research. And then I was like, well, I'm meeting all these bright people, I should turn that into content. And so one of the things that people say, well, that's not how it's done in consulting, is that I draw lots of pictures, and I content daily, and I'm trying to learn from marketing and branding content people, what they do to get cult-like following. I'm trying to apply that to technical consultancy, which is, again, you asked me at the beginning, why this? And I'm like, well, learn stuff, create content, post about it daily, turn digital delivery into a brand as opposed to just a thing. And that's the truth that I've held for about 8 or 9 years, when a mate of mine said, what's missing in your world is a content-led digital consultancy that builds the things that it always talks about. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So that's what I want. I want to build the most recognized digital build brand in Australia. Now, it doesn't mean the biggest. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means recognizable. And I'm even uncomfortable saying that, because today we're only 25 people and 3 years in, but there's some signs that maybe.
I think that the integrity in that execution is part of the success that I see you having, and the success that it will deliver. Is that I've had a conversation with people in the past around eminence versus self-promotion, because it's like a ridge line, and it's very easy to fall to one or the other. And so I think that idea of creating content that delivers value, and it was very outwardly focused. It's actually getting insights and sharing them, because you see the value in sharing them, and in doing that, with integrity, builds the brand by itself. And I think that is there's a lot of noise out there at the moment. So I think that that approach with integrity, I think, is some signal amongst the noise.
Yeah, I like that, signal amongst the noise. Yeah, I don't feel this is our last time interacting, Sam. I really value the time that you've made. I know you've got a lot going on, and I really value just even those last moments of just sort of reflecting on this. I'll gladly take input, feedback, evolve. You're going to probably get sick of seeing the stuff that we take from this and me going, oh, this was an interesting one. But, I do believe in doing it until you're numb, or someone says, please stop. And I think that that there is something in this that I hope to, I think we'll be doing some things, and I think this will show partly how this all comes together. But it's like I think when you talk about going from the coast of Australia to England, kind of know where I want to go, but I'm not sure I can plot all of it out because of the complexity and the oceans changing, and I don't have the map. Probably don't even have all the right crew members, and but people get on as we go. That's what's happening. People are, it's an interesting boat. I'll get on that boat. So I don't know.
Well, I think also sometimes those pioneering journeys, there is there's safety and success in numbers, and I think that collaborative ecosystem, focused on the why, focused on the impact and the outcome, being very outwardly focused on delivering value to clients, doesn't necessitate a large organization. It just necessitates collaborators with a shared sort of mission in regard to delivery. And so I think that one, you don't have to travel alone, and two, it doesn't mean that you need a bigger boat, because you can recruit people along the way who may have their own boats but are committed to the same journey.
I think so, and I hope so. Sam, I'm going to end here. Thank you so much for your time. You don't need to go. I'm just going to press pause, and then we'll wrap up after offline. Okay.
Cheers.
Thank you, Sam.
Pleasure.